Hey everyone, how's it going? Azren here. So first and foremost, I want to give a big thank you to you guys. There have been a lot more comments and a lot more people who've been hitting the like button on my videos, and I really appreciate that. A couple people specifically, I think it's Blackso11, who's been leaving comments really ever since I first started the channel, so I really appreciate it. Shane as well, I think it's Shane Morale, if I remember correctly. Shane, you've also been leaving comments, especially more recently. I really appreciate it, so thank you guys so much. Now, straight to business. I want to talk about something which has been on my mind for probably about the past week or so now, which is the different phases or the different stages of language learning. And so here's my perspective on this. I think you start off, when you're first learning language, you start off in what I call the useless phase. What is the useless phase? Well, the useless phase is the stage of language learning where you know so little about whatever language you're studying that you are completely useless in the language. Like no matter what situation you are in, you know so little that you can't function. Like you can't get through any scenario, even if it's really simple. So that's the useless phase. I think there comes a point where you actually transition out of that and you go into what I like to call like the talkative phase. What is the talkative phase? Well, for me anyway, what that means to me is this is the phase where you've learned a lot of the basics of the language, you've learned a decent amount of vocabulary, and all of a sudden there's a day where you wake up and you're like, wow, I'm sort of getting this language. I'm sort of getting the hang of it. Like I'm not perfect. Heck, I'm not even very good, but I'm not bad anymore. At least I can have a basic conversation. At least I can understand some of what, some things that native speakers say. And all of a sudden you start to talk a little bit more because you feel a little bit more confident. Now in my experience, what tends to happen after you hit this talkative phase is you go backwards and you actually go back into a silent phase. Sounds really strange, but let me explain where I'm coming from. As you're talking with more people, as you're getting more confident, something happens. You'll hit some kind of event which crushes your confidence back down to zero. For example, maybe you were talking with people, you were doing well in class, you could understand the teacher, you could understand the vocabulary, but then you spoke with a native speaker and everything went out the window. You were trying to say things and they weren't understanding, or you wanted to say things but you didn't know how to say them, or maybe the native speaker was speaking to you and you understood nothing. So all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, maybe I suck. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought. And all of a sudden you go right back to being pretty quiet again because you're like, actually, maybe I still suck at this language. Maybe I'm still not very good. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people, the temptation or the tendency is when you hit this first major roadblock or this major roadblock that brings your confidence down, I think a lot of people tend to quit or they're scared to start talking again, right? I'm actually feeling that right now in Chinese. I was feeling really good, and then all of a sudden, I don't really know what happened. I don't really know what happened. I think it was I started to speak with more native speakers. I couldn't communicate, and it's all of a sudden I felt it. I've been a lot more quiet recently. I'm not talking as much, and actually I just don't feel as confident in Chinese. And I think that's normal. I do think it's normal, and I'm not overly worried. But I think what happens, the people who really get good at a language are the ones who transition from that quiet phase and go back into the talkative phase and try and go back into talking again, practicing, and not as afraid to make mistakes. So it's kind of like a pendulum. It's kind of like a pendulum, or what's the other one? Or like a seesaw, a teeter-totter, right? You're always going back and forth between this quiet, talkative, quiet, talkative, quiet, talkative, right? You're quiet when you're not confident. Slowly you study, you become more confident, which means you become more talkative. But then when you're really talkative and you're so confident, something happens that brings your confidence right back down. And what happens? You become quiet again. And I think the more fluent you become, the less extreme that swing is. It's not like you're super quiet and then very talkative and then super quiet. I think it becomes less extreme. And I think it happens less often, right? So once you become better and better in a language, I think you hit a level where you're just you're talkative almost every day. Or if you're an introvert, maybe you're less talkative. If you're an extrovert, maybe you're more. But you hit this point where you feel comfortable in the language, right? But I think in the early stages, you really do hit this big swing of emotions of like scared and nervous and not confident, and then very confident after something really good happens, and then back down to not confident, and you're quiet. And I think it's this big, almost emotional roller coaster, which then affects your behavior and affects how you act when you're speaking in the language and when you're learning a language. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked that, and I will talk to you guys, talk to you guys later. Bye for now.